Hello guys, in this tutorial we will see an introduction to programming with C. I am Rohit Kumar, a software team member of GTU Robotics Club. So let's get started. So let's start talking about functions. Functions are a block of code that perform a task. They are used so that we do not need to write the same piece of code again and again. They divide a complex problem into smaller segments of code and makes the program easy to understand and reuse. They enhance readability of the code. There are two types of functions: standard library functions and the user-defined functions. Functions can be called by call by value and call by reference. We will see both of these one by one. First of all, let's talk about the function syntax. So a function has two parts: function declaration and its definition. In a declaration, we have to give a return type of the function or the type of function, then the function name and the parameter list, whatever parameters our function have. Then the definition section, which starts similar to the declaration, but it has the body of the function attached. We write the operations that a function should perform, and whenever we require that function, we call the function by its name and passing the parameters to it. So we saw the structure. Now let's see an example. So here we have a function of return type void and its function name is square. We have only one parameter of integer type. Inside the main we are calling it and passing a value of 10, and inside the definition of the square function we have a printf function that prints the square of the variable x. So we saw an example. So whenever we want to use the square function, whenever we want to perform a square, we can just call the square function and pass a parameter. So and it will print the square of the number. So you saw how easy it becomes. Else we have to write, or it's just a simple example, but consider that if you are performing a segment of code that is a little bit lengthier and we are performing it multiple times, then in such scenario we have to write that piece of code again and again whenever we want to use that. So you saw how easy it becomes when we use the functions. So now let's talk about the call by value and call by reference. In the call by value, so let's see an example. Here we have a geek function which has two parameters, val1 and val2, whose values are respectively 10 and 12. So, and in the definition we have two variables num1 and num2. So whenever the function is called, geek function is called, the value of the two variables, the parameters, is passed. Only the value is passed. So the 10 and 12 respectively will be stored in num1 and num2. And here we can see, here it is changed, x is changed to 40 and y is changed to 50. So let's see how does that affect in the code. Here we have an example in which I have a function of int vo. I should have kept it void, so don't worry. So we have a function which has a parameter of x. We have a parameter, integer parameter x, and we are incrementing it by a value of 10. Inside the main we have x, a small x variable which we assign equals to 5, and we call the function and pass the value of x. Now when we print the value of x, what do you think the answer should be? Because we are calling the function by value, hence only a copy of that value of the variable small x is passed into the function, and the capital X receives a 5 and it is incremented to 10. So here the value of and the scope of this capital X is limited to only this function, hence the output of capital X will be 15. However, because this function has called the X was called by a call by value method, hence the small x's value will remain the same, and here we will print out 5. So now let's see what's the difference between call by reference. So in call by reference, here we have a variable integer n whose value is 10 and a function, and we are calling a function, and here we are passing the address of that variable. So let's see what happens when we call this function. The address of the variable n is passed, and we receive that into this pointer, and then we change the value of this pointer to a 20. Hence you can guess if the address of the variable was this 2008, so that value was passed when the function was called, and this pointer rewrites the value of this variable n from 10 to 20, and hence after the function is executed, when we print out the value of n, the answer will be printed 20. That happens when we use call function with a call by reference method. Now let's see arrays. Array is a collection of data items, all of the same type, accessed using a common name. A one-dimensional array is like a list. A two-dimensional array is like a table. The C language places no limits on the number of dimensions in an array. Elements of the array can be accessed by their index value. We will see an example in the next slide. First, we will talk more about the arrays. So, an array's index always starts with a 0, and the last index of the array is whatever the size we have defined minus 1. That's the index value. Its length will be equals to the value we have equals to the length we have defined, but its index will be 1 less. For example, if we are declaring an array of integer a5, so it will contain an array of 5, an array of 5 integer values indexed from 0 to 4, a4 as a fifth element. And now if we talk about the two-dimensional array, so a two-dimensional array is defined by two square brackets. First is the row and second is the column. So this is the row length, this is the column length. And if we are declaring a variable of an array, a two-dimensional array of 5 by 5, then it can store values up to 25. And one more thing, as we have seen earlier, the array index will be from A00 to to the maximum A44. So let's see an example. Here we want the user to add number of variables of his choice. So we declare a integer variable num and we print input the values, and then the user will input the length of the array or the number of the values he want to add. From that we derive an array named r, and the length equals to the number the user has passed or input. We run a for loop and read the values from the user. So that was a simple example. Now let's move on to the pointers. So the pointers are special variables that instead of storing values store the address of variables. So if the pointer stores the address of integer variable, it is called integer pointer, and it can be declared by int star the pointer name. Similarly, if the pointer stores the address of a double, then it is called a double pointer, a character, then it's called a character pointer, and so on. Here we see the different declarations of the pointers. So for assigning the values to the pointer, we pass the address of the variable into the pointer. Now let's see how pointer works. So let's say we have a integer variable whose value is 10. That value, if we want to assign to a pointer, we will pass the address to the pointer, and now if we want to change the value of the pointer, we can change it by this way, hence its value will be changed to a 20. Now if we want to add the value of a pointer into another pointer, then we use a double star operator and pass the address of the pointer, and then when we change the value of the variable, the initial variable var is changed to 30. So we saw how. Now let's see an example of the pointers. So here we have a integer variable a whose value we assign equals to 10. Then we define a pointer IP, and inside the pointer and to the pointer we pass the address of the variable a. So if we print the IP value, then the output will be something a random number, and if we print with a star IP, then it fetches the value of 10, the value of variable a, that is equal to 10. The random number we saw here was actually the address of this, the memory address of this variable a. So, and the star is called the dereferencing operator. The pointers are very useful in our coding. Now finally let's see the compiler directives. So the compiler directives or the preprocessor directives are the keyword that tell the compiler to perform certain tasks before the actual compilation of the code. All of these begin with a hash symbol. These are used because they make the code simple. There are 4 types of preprocessor directives. The macro expansion directives, that is the hash define, the file inclusion directives that we have used earlier and also saw in the codes, the hash include, the conditional preprocessor directives like ifdef and if, hash ifdef, hash and if, and the miscellaneous preprocessor directives like hash and def, hash pragma, hash error, etc. Let's see how the compiler, to understand the preprocessors better, we can see how we get the executable program at the end from the source code we provide. So the source code we provide, when we run it inside the computer, first the preprocessor works on it and outputs a expanded source code file, which the compiler compiles to form an object code, and to make an executable file, a linker works on it and outputs a program.exe, an executable file. So we saw the flow of the code to form the output. So thank you guys. Hope you learned some new concepts from this tutorial. Guys, C programming is a very wide skill. It was just a basic introduction, but I highly encourage you to learn more about it. Of course, the only way to learn programming is by doing yourself. So to learn better, there are many online websites like SoloLearn, HackerRank, CodeChef, etc. Personally, I like HackerRank. So that's all guys from my side. Thank you and all the best.